What if I told you that the Bible as we know it, the very foundation of faith for billions, might be missing a crucial piece of the puzzle? What if there was another book, an ancient text known as Little Genesis, that claims to fill in the gaps, revealing hidden stories about the creation, the lives of the patriarchs, and even the very laws of God himself? This text, the Book of Jubilees, preserved for centuries in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible, claims to offer a deeper, more cosmic insight into God's divine plan. But here's the mystery that has baffled scholars for ages. This book was banned, excluded from most of the Christian world. Why? What secrets does it hold that were deemed too dangerous, too controversial for mainstream Christianity? Today we are pulling back the veil to uncover the mysterious Book of Jubilees. We will explore its 50 chapters, delving into the lost details of the Genesis narrative and uncovering a cosmic perspective where angels, heavenly time, and hidden commandments were passed down to humanity from the dawn of creation. But this book does more than just add detail. It makes a staggering claim that the calendar followed by most of the world is fundamentally wrong, and that time itself was given a sacred, divine structure by God that very few still follow today. So, why was this ancient text rejected? What truths does it contain that the early church decided you shouldn't know? Join me as we journey back to the beginning, to a story you thought you knew, and discover the secrets of the Book of Jubilees. The story begins where Genesis begins, with the creation of the world. But Jubilees immediately expands the narrative, pulling the camera back to reveal a far grander cosmic stage. It tells us that when God created the universe, he didn't just bring forth light, land, and life. He established the very structure of time itself, aligning it perfectly with his divine and eternal order. This is where Jubilees introduces the profound concept of sacred time. Unlike the familiar calendar that governs our modern lives, the Book of Jubilees reveals a precise solar calendar, overseen by heavenly angels, that dictates the cosmic cycles of the universe. This isn't merely about counting days, it's about living in perfect, sacred rhythm with God's will. Jubilees claims that humanity was always meant to follow this divine calendar, a year composed of exactly 364 days, divided into 4 seasons of precisely 91 days each. This perfect structure ensures that holy days, like the Sabbath and the great festivals, always fall on the correct date, year after year, without fail. It is a system of perfect harmony, a divine clockwork that, according to Jubilees, most of the world has tragically forgotten. In the familiar account of Genesis, the story starts with the creation of the earth. But Jubilees takes us back even further, revealing a detail that changes everything. Before the world was even formed, on the very first day of creation, God brought forth the angels. These celestial beings are not mere observers in Jubilees, they are active participants in the governance of the cosmos, playing a crucial role in regulating time and the seasons. The book reveals that these angels were assigned specific duties by God himself. Some were tasked with overseeing natural phenomena, guiding the movements of the sun, moon, and stars, while others served as divine messengers and guardians of God's holy laws. This concept of angels controlling the heavens is not entirely unique, appearing in other ancient texts, but Jubilees places a powerful emphasis on how these angelic beings maintain the divine order of the universe, ensuring that everything follows its God-given path. As Jubilees 2-9 states, God ordained that the sun should keep its course according to the divisions of the seasons. These angels don't just watch over humanity from afar, they are intimately involved in managing the very fabric of time. When humans fall out of sync with God's sacred time, it introduces chaos, a theme that becomes a central, driving force throughout the entire Book of Jubilees. One of the most radical and controversial claims in the Book of Jubilees is its unwavering insistence that the world must follow a solar calendar, not the lunar calendar that many ancient cultures, including eventually the Israelites, adopted. According to Jubilees, the solar calendar is the only true and correct way to measure time because it aligns flawlessly with God's divine order established at creation. The book meticulously explains that the solar year is comprised of 364 days, which breaks down into 52 perfect weeks. Each season, spring, summer, fall, and winter, contains exactly 13 weeks, or 91 days. This divine system guarantees that the Sabbath and all other sacred festivals are observed on the correct days every single year, without the shifting and adjustments required by a lunar calendar. This solar calendar bears a striking resemblance to the Ethiopian calendar, which is still in use today by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. The Ethiopian year is divided into 13 months, 12 months of 30 days each, with an additional month called Pagume, consisting of 5 or 6 days to complete the solar cycle. Could it be that the Ethiopian calendar is one of the last remaining reflections of the sacred time described in the Book of Jubilees? In stark contrast, the lunar calendar is viewed by Jubilees as a corruption, a deviation from the divine blueprint. Because the lunar cycle is irregular, it causes months and festivals to drift over time, and Jubilees delivers a stern warning about this deviation, seeing it as a source of spiritual disorder. It prophesies, "There will be those who will surely make observations of the moon, but they will disturb the seasons and make an abominable day, the day of testimony." Jubilees 6:37. For the author of Jubilees, following the lunar calendar is not just a simple mistake, it is an act of spiritual disobedience. The book passionately argues that by returning to the sacred solar calendar, humanity can realign itself with the divine rhythms set in motion at the dawn of the world. While the Book of Jubilees reaffirms the traditional 6-day creation narrative from Genesis, it delves deeper, revealing the profound cosmic significance of the first Sabbath. According to Jubilees, God did not simply rest on the 7th day. He sanctified it, establishing it as a divine and eternal institution, a perpetual law given to both angels in heaven and humans on earth. The Sabbath is presented as the very foundation of time, a day set apart from the beginning of creation, destined to be observed forever. This idea of the Sabbath as a cosmic principle is absolutely critical in Jubilees. It doesn't just govern the weekly cycle of rest and worship, it is intrinsically tied to the larger structure of time, including the grand Jubilee cycles of 49 years. These cycles were designed to bring the world back into harmony with God's order, offering a sacred period of rest, release, and renewal for the land, for the people, and even for the angelic realm. As the text declares, "For he sanctified the 7th day, and blessed it for all times, as a sign of holiness for all his works." Jubilees 2:1. This powerful emphasis on the Sabbath as an eternal, cosmic law demonstrates that Jubilees is not merely retelling the Genesis story. It is revealing the hidden, sacred architecture behind the cycles of time that govern all of creation. The Book of Jubilees tells us that Adam was created on the 6th day, just as we read in Genesis. But it adds a fascinating and crucial new layer to his story. According to this ancient text, immediately after creating Adam, God gave him specific commandments, laws that he was to follow from the very beginning. These laws, delivered by angels, included the sacred observance of the Sabbath, laws of purity, and the divine rules concerning marriage and worship. These were not suggestions. They were part of the covenant God made with humanity. While Genesis describes God's direct interactions with Adam, Jubilees introduces angelic beings as holy mediators, divine teachers who instructed Adam on how to follow God's commandments. These angels, particularly the ones known as the angels of the presence, were tasked with ensuring that Adam and Eve understood the laws of holiness, sacrifice, and moral conduct. The text describes this angelic interaction in detail. "And on the 6th day of the 2nd week, we brought, according to the word of God, to Adam all the beasts, and all the cattle, and all the birds, according to their kinds." Jubilees 3:1-2. This angelic instruction was meant to reinforce the idea that God's law is not a mere human invention but an extension of the heavenly order. The angels taught Adam that he must observe these laws as an eternal covenant, just as they themselves observe the same laws in the heavenly realm. This raises a profound question. Could it be that God's laws, passed down through angels, were given to humanity long before Moses received the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai? After the tragic fall of Adam and Eve, Jubilees adds new insight into the story of their children, Cain and Abel. While Genesis tells us that Cain murdered Abel out of jealousy, the Book of Jubilees provides additional, somber details about the events that followed. Cain's horrific act is seen as the first major breach of God's divine law on earth, a sin that unleashes devastating spiritual consequences for all of humanity. But while Cain is cast out, Jubilees is quick to emphasize that the righteous line of humanity is not broken. It continues through Seth, Adam's third son. In Jubilees, Seth is portrayed as a figure of profound righteousness, a man who is carefully taught to follow the divine laws that had been handed down by the angels. This righteous continuation through Seth sets the stage for his descendants, including the great patriarch Noah, to carry on the sacred covenant with God, ensuring that the divine laws are not lost to the world. The story of Noah and the flood is one of the most well-known narratives in Genesis. But the Book of Jubilees offers additional, powerful revelations about what happened before, during, and after the Great Deluge. In Jubilees, the focus is not just on Noah's survival, but on the new covenant God establishes with him. Afterward, a covenant that powerfully re-emphasizes the importance of purity, righteousness, and the strict observance of God's laws. Before the flood, Jubilees delves deeper into the pervasive corruption of the earth, focusing with chilling detail on the Nephilim, the monstrous offspring of fallen angels and human women. While Genesis 6:1-4 mentions the Nephilim only briefly, Jubilees provides much more context, showing how these giants were a primary cause of the lawlessness and wickedness that led God to cleanse the earth. The book describes a world in utter chaos, and lawlessness increased on the earth, and all flesh corrupted its way, alike men and cattle and beasts and birds and everything that walks on the earth. And they began to devour each other. Jubilees 5:2. This terrifying moral decay was not just a result of human sin. It was fueled by the influence of fallen angels who introduced forbidden knowledge and corrupted the natural order of God's creation. God's response is swift and absolute. He sends the flood to wipe out this corruption, but he preserves Noah and his family because of their righteousness. After the flood, Jubilees reveals that God didn't just promise never to flood the earth again. He established a new covenant with Noah that included specific laws of purity and sacrifice. These laws, which were later passed down to the Israelites, were intended to help humanity maintain holiness and avoid the corruption that led to the flood. A key detail in Jubilees is that Noah was specifically instructed to observe the Sabbath and to follow the same laws of sacrifice and purity that were given to Adam. This covenant marked a new beginning for humanity, but it also underscored the critical importance of remaining obedient to God's laws to prevent further judgment. The laws of sacrifice, which would later be formalized in the Mosaic Law, were already being followed by Noah, including instructions on how to offer burnt offerings to God and how to remain pure in both body and spirit. In Genesis 12, we are introduced to Abraham when God calls him to leave his homeland and journey to the land of Canaan. But Jubilees takes us much further back into Abraham's youth, adding an entirely new and revolutionary dimension to his story. According to this ancient text, Abraham grew up in a family steeped in idolatry. His own father, Terah, worshipped false gods carved from wood and stone. This critical detail is not mentioned in Genesis, but Jubilees paints a vivid and dramatic picture of a young Abraham who courageously rejects the pagan practices all around him, choosing instead to seek and follow the one true God. The book recounts a pivotal moment, and he said, "My father, tell me, what is this idol you worship?" And Abraham saw that it was an image of stone. And Abraham burned them before the eyes of all and fled into the wilderness. Jubilees 11:16-17. While Genesis focuses on Abraham's obedience to God's call to leave his home, Jubilees portrays him as a spiritual revolutionary, a bold iconoclast who physically destroys the idols in his father's house, making a defiant stand against the idolatry of his time. This powerful act of spiritual rebellion sets the stage for Abraham's future role as the father of the chosen people, a nation that would reject paganism and follow the laws of the one true God. One of the most striking differences between Genesis and the Book of Jubilees is the assertion that Abraham followed divine laws long before Moses was ever born. In Genesis, there is no mention of Abraham being given a set of laws other than the covenant of circumcision in chapter 17. However, in Jubilees, Abraham is presented as a patriarch who already observed the Sabbath, made sacrifices according to divine instruction, and followed numerous other laws that are typically associated with Moses. According to Jubilees, these laws were not invented during the time of Moses. They were an eternal code passed down from the angels to the patriarchs, beginning with Adam himself. Abraham received these commandments directly from angels, and he was expected to follow them as a fundamental part of his covenant relationship with God. As Jubilees 12:25 states, "And he was taught by the angels concerning the things written in the tablets of heaven." Unlike in Genesis, where Abraham's actions are presented as part of his personal journey of faith, Jubilees portrays him as a key figure in a grand cosmic plan. He is guided by angels, and the laws he follows are part of a divine order that governs both heaven and earth, including the Sabbath and various purity laws that Moses would later formalize for the nation of Israel. The covenant of circumcision is one of the most pivotal moments in Abraham's story. In Genesis 17, God commands Abraham to circumcise himself and all the males in his household as an everlasting sign of their covenant. But Jubilees goes even further, revealing that this was not just a symbolic act for Abraham and his descendants. It was part of a cosmic law, eternally inscribed on the heavenly tablets. According to Jubilees, circumcision wasn't a new command for Abraham. It was a divine law that had been in existence since the creation of the world. This sacred covenant was etched on the heavenly tablets, which are seen as God's divine blueprint for all of creation, containing all the laws that govern both angels and humans. And this law is for all the generations forever. For it is an eternal ordinance, ordained and written on the heavenly tablets. Jubilees 15:25. While Genesis focuses on Abraham's act of obedience to God's command, Jubilees portrays this act as part of a much larger, pre-existing divine order. Circumcision is not just a physical sign. It is a way of aligning oneself with the cosmic laws that govern the entire universe. The binding of Isaac, known as the Akedah, is one of the most emotionally powerful and theologically profound moments in Genesis. In Genesis 22, God tests Abraham's faith by asking him to sacrifice his beloved son, Isaac. Jubilees retells this harrowing story, but it adds an extra layer of chilling, spiritual warfare. In Jubilees, the test is not just a private matter between Abraham and God, it is part of a larger cosmic conflict. According to the book, the angel Mastema, a sinister figure often associated with Satan or the accuser, is the one who suggests this terrible test to God, hoping and believing that Abraham will fail. Mastema represents the forces of evil, constantly seeking to undermine and destroy the righteous. The Book of Jubilees adds that angels intervened during the binding, and that God allowed the test to proceed to demonstrate that Abraham's faith was stronger than any temptation evil could conjure. "And I stood before him and before the prince of the Mastema, and the Lord said, 'Command him not to lay his hand on the lad, nor to do anything to him, for I have shown that he fears the Lord.'" Jubilees 18:10. This addition introduces a whole new level of spiritual significance to the story. It is no longer just a test of Abraham's personal obedience. It is a battle in the cosmic war between good and evil. Mastema tries to lead Abraham into failure, but God's intervention proves that faithfulness will always triumph. In Genesis 25, we're told that before Jacob and Esau were even born, God revealed to their mother, Rebekah, that the two brothers would become the heads of two nations, and that the older will serve the younger. Jubilees expands on this prophecy, emphasizing that this was not just a prediction of a family feud, it was part of a cosmic design in which Jacob was always predestined to inherit the blessing and continue the line of righteousness that began with Abraham. Jubilees adds a clear layer of predestination, revealing that Jacob was chosen from birth to carry on the covenant, while Esau was destined to stray from God's plan. The book even notes that Isaac and Rebekah were given divine knowledge about Esau's rebellious nature and the future opposition his descendants would pose to Israel. And the Lord said unto her, 2 nations shall be divided from your womb, and 1 nation shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. Jubilees 19:13. In Genesis, we see this struggle play out through Jacob's cunning and Esau's impulsiveness. But Jubilees explains that Jacob was always meant to inherit the birthright, and his actions, while deceptive, were part of a larger fulfillment of a divine plan. One of the key differences in Jubilees is the portrayal of Esau. He is more than just a brother who foolishly loses his birthright. Jubilees emphasizes that Esau represents a line of rebellion against God's chosen people. His descendants, the Edomites, are portrayed as a nation that will continuously rise in opposition to Israel, fulfilling the prophecy that the elder will serve the younger. While Genesis mentions the hostility between the brothers after the birthright incident, Jubilees expands this into a prophetic theme, showing how Esau's descendants would become a nation that directly and perpetually opposes Jacob's line, the future Israelites. The text states, "And Esau took his wives and his sons, and he went up to the hill country of Seir and lived there. And Esau became a nation, and they oppressed Jacob's descendants." Jubilees 37:1. Jubilees makes it clear that Esau's rebellion was not just personal, but national and generational, reflecting the spiritual battle that began in the womb. After Jacob receives the blessing from his father, Isaac, an event that in Genesis ensures he becomes the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, Jubilees goes even further. It emphasizes that Jacob was given not just a blessing of prosperity, but a continuation of the divine laws that had been passed down from Abraham. According to Jubilees, after Jacob receives the blessing, God and the angels reveal to him the sacred laws that he and his descendants must follow. These include the observance of the Sabbath, purity laws, and the all-important sacred calendar. Jacob is portrayed as the new keeper of these laws, tasked with the holy responsibility of ensuring that his descendants, the future nation of Israel, follow them as part of their covenant relationship with God. In his vision of the ladder to heaven, the Lord appears and says, "I am the Lord God of Abraham, your father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon you are sleeping, I give to you and your seed." Jubilees 27. Arshasan. In Jubilees, the laws Jacob receives are part of the cosmic order that governs both heaven and earth, elevating his role beyond just receiving a birthright. He becomes the custodian of God's eternal commandments. Jubilees expands the rivalry between Jacob and Esau into a prophetic vision of the ongoing struggle between their descendants. The book suggests that the nations that arise from Esau will continually oppose Jacob's descendants, the Israelites, throughout history. This transforms the personal feud into a spiritual battle between righteousness, Jacob, Israel, and rebellion, Esau, Edom. In Jubilees, this prophetic struggle is a part of the greater cosmic war between good and evil. Esau's line represents those nations that will become enemies of God's chosen people, a tension that continues throughout biblical history. As the book notes, "And Jacob and his sons came down into Egypt to Joseph, and Esau's sons remained in the land of Edom, and from that day the enmity between the nations remained." Jubilees 45:3. This vision of an ongoing spiritual struggle reflects the broader themes of Jubilees, where the story of the Patriarchs is part of a larger cosmic drama involving the destinies of nations and the ultimate battle between good and evil. In Genesis, we see the birth of Jacob's 12 sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin, who become the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel. However, Jubilees adds a layer of divine order to these births, showing that they were not just the result of human relationships and rivalries, but part of a predetermined plan set by God. According to Jubilees, the timing and sequence of their births were divinely ordained to align with the sacred calendar. The book emphasizes that each son was born according to the divine schedule, making their very existence part of the larger cosmic plan. And Jacob's wives and maidservants gave birth to his 12 sons, each according to the time set by the Lord, and their destinies were written on the heavenly tablets. Jubilees 28-12. While Genesis focuses on the family drama surrounding the births, Jubilees stresses that their births had been written in the heavenly tablets, reinforcing the idea that the 12 tribes were part of God's predestined plan from the beginning. A significant moment in Genesis is when Reuben, Jacob's eldest son, loses his status as firstborn after committing a grave sin. Jubilees expands on this event, emphasizing its spiritual consequences and explaining why Judah and Levi rise to prominence in his place. In Jubilees, Reuben's sin is framed as a direct violation of the divine laws established long before. His actions are not just a personal failing, but a spiritual transgression that disqualifies him from leading the tribes. This allows for Judah, the fourth son, to emerge as the royal leader from whom kings will come, and for Levi to take on the sacred role of the priesthood, all as part of the divine order set by God. Because of his sin, the firstborn, Reuben, was not reckoned in the inheritance, but Judah was chosen as the prince over his brothers, and Levi for the priesthood forever. Jubilees 33-10. While Genesis mentions Reuben's disqualification, Jubilees places a much stronger emphasis on how this event aligns with the cosmic plan, connecting the destinies of Judah and Levi to a larger spiritual framework. In the Bible, the tribe of Levi is set apart for the priesthood, with Moses and Aaron descending from this tribe. But in Jubilees, Levi's role as the priestly tribe is framed as an eternal mandate, established in the heavenly tablets long before the Levitical priesthood was formalized under Moses. According to Jubilees, Levi was chosen by God to be the spiritual leader of the tribes, responsible for ensuring the divine laws were observed. His priestly role is described as part of the cosmic order, connecting heaven and earth. And Levi was set apart for the priesthood forever, to offer sacrifices and to mediate between the people and the Lord, for it was ordained on the heavenly tablets. Jubilees 32-17. This makes Levi's priesthood not just a response to historical circumstances, but an essential part of the cosmic order that predates the events at Mount Sinai. The 12 tribes themselves are not just inheritors of land, they are guardians of God's law, with each tribe carrying a specific spiritual responsibility to serve as stewards of God's commandments for all generations. When Joseph's brothers sell him into slavery, Genesis portrays it as an act motivated by simple jealousy. Jubilees, however, frames this event in terms of grave, cosmic consequences. The brothers' betrayal is not just a family dispute, it is a serious transgression against the divine order. And his brothers sold Joseph into slavery, and their sin was recorded on the heavenly tablets, for they had transgressed the eternal laws. Jubilees 34-9. This emphasis on the heavenly tablets makes their sin part of a larger cosmic drama, linking their betrayal to the future suffering of Israel under Egyptian bondage. Joseph's own rise to power in Egypt is also portrayed as a divinely orchestrated event. It wasn't just his wisdom, it was his destiny, written on the heavenly tablets, that he would rule over Egypt to save his family and set the stage for the Exodus. Jubilees even adds the detail that angels were sent by God to guard Joseph on his journey, ensuring he would fulfill his destiny. And the Lord sent his angels to guard Joseph on his journey to Egypt, that he might not perish, for his life was precious in the eyes of the Lord. Jubilees 34-21. Finally, Jubilees portrays Joseph's life as prophetic, foreshadowing the enslavement and eventual deliverance of the Israelites. A promise he makes to his brothers on his deathbed, assuring them that their deliverance is sealed on the heavenly tablets. In Exodus, Israel's enslavement begins when a new Pharaoh who did not know Joseph comes to power. But in Jubilees, this period of bondage is seen as a fulfillment of a cosmic prophecy, already written in the heavenly tablets. And it was written on the heavenly tablets that they would be oppressed in Egypt, and that God would bring them out with great power and wonders. Jubilees 48:1. Their suffering is framed as a necessary trial to prepare them for receiving the law at Mount Sinai. Jubilees also adds a layer of spiritual warfare to the story. The oppression of Israel was part of a battle between good and evil, with the evil prince Mastema actively working to harden Pharaoh's heart and increase Israel's suffering. And the prince of the Mastema stood against them, and he sought to destroy them with hard bondage and to cause them to forsake their faith in the Lord. Jubilees 48:9. In this view, the 10 plagues are not only divine judgments but cosmic victories, strikes against both the physical and spiritual rulers of Egypt, demonstrating that only the God of Israel held true power. Jubilees insists that the Exodus itself was carefully timed according to the divine calendar, and it was written on the heavenly tablets that on the 14th day of the first month, at the appointed time, God would bring Israel out of Egypt, for this was the day set apart from the beginning of creation. Jubilees 49:1. This makes the Exodus more than a historical event. It becomes part of the spiritual fabric of creation. When Moses receives the law on Mount Sinai, Jubilees emphasizes that these laws were not created in that moment. They were already inscribed on the heavenly tablets from the beginning of creation, serving as a guide for both angels and humans. Moses was simply the chosen human recipient of laws that had been preordained for all time. The Mosaic law, therefore, is not just a set of rules for the Israelites. It's a reflection of a divine order that governs the entire universe. This is why, in Jubilees, the patriarchs like Abraham were already observing the Sabbath and other laws. They were revealed to them by angels. The law is a timeless code, and Moses was the one chosen to deliver it in its complete form to the nation of Israel. The Book of Jubilees also presents the laws given to Moses as eternal, binding not just for Israel, but for all generations, and even for the angels in heaven. The angels themselves are portrayed as keeping the Sabbath and observing God's festivals. And the law that was given to Moses on Mount Sinai is eternal and will be observed in heaven and on earth. The angels keep the Sabbath, and the righteous will observe the commandments forever. Jubilees 50-13. This universalizes the law, making it part of the very fabric of the cosmos. Finally, Jubilees casts its gaze toward the future, revealing that the destiny of Israel is not left to chance. It is part of a divinely ordained timeline, written on the heavenly tablets, that outlines the rise and fall of nations, the exile and return of Israel, and the eventual final judgment. In the end times, the angels of the Lord will execute God's judgment, separating the righteous from the wicked. Mastema, the leader of the evil spirits, will be bound and cast into the abyss. And the Lord will send his angels to gather his chosen, and they shall bind the prince of the evil spirits, casting him into the abyss until the time of judgment, when he shall be destroyed forever. Jubilees 23:29. This will be followed by a period of great tribulation, after which Israel will be restored to their land and renewed in their covenant with God. This restoration will pave the way for a messianic kingdom on earth, where God's chosen ruler will establish righteousness, the law will be upheld, and the wicked will be cast into the lake of fire. And the Lord will establish his kingdom on earth, and the righteous shall rule with him, for the law shall be written on their hearts, and the wicked shall be cast into the lake of fire. Jubilees 50. Shasan. This final judgment brings about the ultimate defeat of evil, ushering in an era of eternal peace and restoring the perfect cosmic order that God intended from the very beginning. From a sacred calendar that governs the universe to divine laws passed down by angels long before Moses, from a spiritual war waged by a demonic prince named Mastema to the foreordained destinies of nations written on heavenly tablets, the Book of Jubilees presents a vision of biblical history that is at once familiar and breathtakingly different. It weaves a narrative where every event, from the birth of a patriarch to the exodus of a nation, is part of a grand, cosmic plan. It challenges our understanding of time, law, and the very nature of the spiritual battle between good and evil. And it leaves us with the lingering, profound question of why such a detailed and theologically rich text was left behind. If you found value in this deep dive into the Book of Jubilees and its unique cosmic vision of biblical history, be sure to share this video with others who might be interested in exploring these profound mysteries. By sharing, you help us continue our mission to uncover ancient texts and reveal the hidden layers of God's eternal plan. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join the conversation in the comments below. What part of the Book of Jubilees surprised you the most? Let us know. Together, we can delve even deeper into these fascinating and timeless biblical insights.